My name is Jim Ryan, and I'm the new instructional designer here at EWU. My job here is to take a look at the programs, courses, and people from a different point of view, to see how all these Lego pieces fit, and to imagine how I can help put them together differently to make something new and amazing. Welcome to the Play to Learn podcast. Today, I'm talking with Mike Stein, the founder and head of IDAtlas, an instructional design co-op that allows new and experienced IDs to collaborate, grow their skill set, work on projects, and get employed. Mike has a great story and an entrepreneurial spirit. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Hi, I'm here with Mike Stein from IDAtlas, and we're going to talk a little bit about instructional design today. So, Mike, how you doing? What you been up to?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I have been mostly working as usual. I have kind of a lot of irons in the fire right now, but mainly I've been working with higher ed institutions to help revamp some of their courses. Recently, I've done some work on continuing education courses that leveraged some gamified-ish simulations. Most notably, the specific project that I'm thinking about is I worked with Texas State to take their hospitality management course, which is supposed to teach students about hospitality and hotel management and all of the things that are involved in kind of sort of running a hotel, but more just to understand like the overall concepts. But they had a module basically that was just like key terms in hospitality. So I was kind of brainstorming with them, what's a better way to present this? And like a lot of times we might just say, okay, key terms, flashcards. Like let's make some digital flashcards, or let's put it into Quizlet, or let's do this or that to just to make it a little bit more interactive. But I was excited because they were open and able to co-sign this idea of hotel simulator, or like kind of hotel tycoon was how I initially pitched it, where the
Wow.
student actually becomes the manager. Yeah, they become the manager of the hotel, and they have to make decisions, and they earn money or they don't earn money, or they go under or they fail. So that was kind of an exciting project that I can kind of go into more detail as needed there.
Yeah. So now let's do that record scratch there. You might be wondering how I got to this point. Let's go
Right.
back in time. So now we got to where you are now. We've established this context. So let's go back in time and tell us how you got from little Mike to big Mike, because you have a really circuitous path that you've traveled, and you're not even living in the United States anymore, if I remember right.
Right, right. Yeah, we should probably have done introductions.
Well, that's what I like to do. Like to take it back,
Okay.
like start.
Welcome.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're going back.
Yeah. Yep, yep. It's the start with the action. But yeah, so 30 some odd years ago I was born, and then I grew up not that far back, I guess. So I graduated from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County more than a decade ago now. It seems crazy. And have been in instructional systems design. I actually was living in Brazil doing that program online. My wife is from Brazil, and I kind of followed her back after meeting her in the States. And we were living in Brazil, teaching English. I did my online master's program from UMBC in instructional systems development and graduated. And then I was like, okay, now what? I think I tried to apply for like one or two jobs at that time and in Brazil, and I was like, okay, well, I probably need experience. No one's calling me back. I don't really speak Portuguese well enough to do this here. So let me go back and try to make some connections in the field, with the goal that again one day we would come back and I would be working remotely from Brazil, but work in the US. So fast forward to now, that's where I am. I am back in Brazil after about 6 years in higher ed in a community college, Howard Community College on the East Coast in Maryland. And during that time, I was hired by the Department of Faculty Development, and our focus was not on e-learning at all. It was on face-to-face teaching, which is a little bit unique At the time, those two departments were completely separated. So there was a faculty development department or office, I guess. It was not even a full department, and it was focused basically purely on face-to-face instruction. And then there was an e-learning side, which handled the LMS and handled online pedagogy and all of that stuff. So my actual background started in face-to-face higher ed instruction besides teaching English as a foreign language in other countries. And during even during my master's program, like through the internship and through actually just like kind of luck getting a contract basically right off the bat, I had actually applied for an internship earlier than when I could start it, and then by the time I got to that point, they were like, "We don't have an internship, but we can just hire you." And I was like, "Okay." So I've kind of been freelancing my entire career, even in it throughout like the master's program, but here and there have been just picking up contracts on the side. And then after leaving the college, I kind of secured enough part-time stable contracts in a way, like where I work with the company and I'm really like partnering. It's not just a one-off thing. I'm kind of embedded in the company. And that has allowed me to have the freedom to come back to Brazil and work basically 100% remotely in all of the things that I do. Then we're slowly catching up, and I apologize for the disorganization here. But after coming to Brazil, my initial idea was like, I'm just gonna work part-time because of the currency exchange rate. I'm just gonna like semi-retire and just be fine and just hang out here and not do anything and just do that.
This is starting to sound really appealing.
Yeah, yeah. It is appealing, even though it didn't turn out that way. It still is definitely a good move if you can make it work. And so I was initially thinking of that, and then I got into the rabbit hole that is the subreddit on instructional design. And then I started talking to people, and one of the things that missed from the higher ed space was the faculty consultation and actually like helping people in that consultant position to be able to say like, "Oh, what's your problem? And let's figure this out and let's do this." Like, there's some of that in like e-learning development, obviously, but it's not as much of the focus as what I was doing in like tutoring and training and coaching that I was doing in the community college. So I kind of missed that, and I was like, "Oh, that would be great. I can teach articulate storyline, and I can teach all these other instructional design things," because there were people that were like, "Does anyone know where I can get a course on this thing? Or are there job coaches or career coaches and things like that?" So that kind of opened a little bit of a rabbit hole there, and I kind of shifted my one-man band of a freelance operation into a more robust kind of instructional design agency, which is IDAtlas today. And that came out of me seeing that there was a gap in people that have skills but maybe don't have a degree, or they have a degree but they don't have experience. And it's kind of like an agency for instructional designers that haven't had the opportunity to get real world experience, but then it's not just like a boot camp where you're just paying me to like learn stuff. It's you actually kind of getting some mentorship and some training on the job, doing parts of projects. Generally, we scaffold, and I don't just say, "Here's a new client, go." But yeah, so that's kind of where my agency is now. I'm continuously growing. I've kind of been in this agency mindset for maybe like a year and a half, 2 years at this point. So still fairly early, but have closed several contracts with different institutions of higher ed, a couple nonprofits, and some small businesses. So I'm still kind of early-ish in that sense, but I've been in the freelance field basically for the past 10-ish years, and 6 of that in higher ed. So long backstory, but at least I didn't start from when I was born.
Well, we could go back that far, but I think you point out a bunch of really great stuff in there, and there's two parts that I want to start at right away. And that when it comes to defining instructional design, it is really kind of impossible because there's two categories that you really hit on, and one is the instructional designer who is that consultant for the actual professors in the university that says, here is the technology that is available to you. And there are universities like the one I'm working in where the instructors are actually the ones who are responsible for generating the majority of the content, and the instructional designer is there to guide them and strategize with them in the best way to deliver that content. And then there's more of the corporate model of instructional design where the instructional designer or the instructional design team has to generate all the content from virtually scratch, which is kind of insane if you think about it, because there's so much involved in that. Because not only do you have to know things like articulate storyline, Adobe Premiere, Photoshop, AI generation, content, audio recording. You also have to be able to meet with the subject matter experts, and especially if you don't live or work in the same area as they do, that's a whole lot of different scheduling. Take us through that process that you usually have to go through.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot in there. So, from a more corporate-esque side, and I do try to avoid, like, the really large, like, Fortune 500, really big business type things, just because I feel like there's less flexibility and less freedom to really solve problems. There's a little bit more red tape. When you working in higher ed, I'm sure that you are familiar with red tape in large organizations and things like that. But yeah, generally in the companies that I'm working with, they're relatively small in terms of like less than 100-ish employees, or down to like 5 to 10 employees in some cases. But yeah, so on the corporate side or for the nonprofits or small businesses, whoever the client tends to be, generally we start with a discovery phase of figuring out what's the problem. This is where we are just defining the problem, trying to figure out what's going on, where's the gap that we need to fill. And at that point, it is a question of, is training the solution to this problem? And that's, I think, a really important thing that sometimes, especially if I'm an e-learning developer, I have to sell you e-learning. I have to sell you training, or I'm not going to solve your problem. That's the benefit of having the instructional designer piece of that as well. So the articulate storyline not being your only tool in the toolbox. And it could be that you don't need a full 3 hour, 10 hour, 40 hour training. You just need a job aid. Or one of my favorite instructional design, I don't know, legends, maybe. I don't know that this is even a real story, but basically, a company brings in instructional designer to fix a problem with performance at a call center. They do the discovery, they do some analysis, and then they talk to the actual people that are working at the call center and they say, hey, what's going on? And they say, well, we can't see the script. And then the instructional designer goes back to the leadership and says, I'm not going to develop your training, just buy different light bulbs. And they change the light bulbs, and then performance increases because now people can see the script. So in that case, it is a very much the role of the instructional designer not to steer people towards training, but to identify when training is appropriate and how that works. So especially in the corporate field where there's a lot more focused on ROI and like data improving your worth, that piece of it is really important, because if I spend $10,000 to develop a training, the company wants that $10,000 back plus 2, 3, 4 times more in profit generation or in whatever else. So again, we spend a lot of time in that discovery phase, figuring out what's going on with the client. There's different needs analysis, whether that's organizational needs analysis, task analysis, learner analysis, and those kind of things. And then once we have defined the problem, figured out, okay, this is a problem that training, we need to change a skill, an attitude, or a behavior, at least one with the target audience here. All right, how do we develop that? So then we talk about what might a solution look like, whether that is putting something into an LMS if they've already gotten a system, or it could be that we're developing videos, could be that we're developing job aids, could be that in some cases developing a mobile app or different functionality into existing systems. So again, I think I would just encourage all instructional designers and people thinking about this to not just look at Articulate as the solution, because it is a tool that can do one certain thing. But yeah, and then there's some design in there, there's the development phase. I personally like to have a lot of back and forth with clients and getting that feedback. So instead of waiting until the end of the project and say, hey, did we totally miss the mark here? It's kind of prototyping. I'm a little bit more of a fan of iterative design with the SAM kind of model rather than, all right, I've analyzed this. Now I'm going to design it. Now I'm going to develop it. And now I'm going to ask you at the end for feedback, and we'll see if I have to go back and redo everything now. So back and forth a little bit with the clients. Yeah, I'm frequently on Zoom, Teams, and Google Meet, Slack. Yeah, pretty WhatsApp in some cases. Just depends on what systems the clients are using. And being in Brazil, I'm an hour ahead of Eastern time before daylight savings time. So my California clients, I wake up later sometimes. So not as many early mornings. Or more realistically, with 2 kids, I'm up early and then I just don't have to start work until later. So yeah. So
which is
yeah.
really advantageous. Yeah, so I always find it really hilarious because the time I was between jobs and you're looking at all these requirements for instructional design and the articulate storyline, that whole expectation is really kind of insane in what they're expecting, and also from articulate itself because the software is so ridiculously expensive to have to subscribe to, and then you have to spend all that time training yourself and how to learn it, and it's like a chicken and egg kind of a deal where you want to grow your skills and articulate storyline because all these companies are demanding articulate storyline, whether or not that's the best solution for their problems, but it's ridiculously expensive. So how have you been able to navigate that problem?
Yes. I wasn't gonna bring this up, but since you did, I'm gonna go I'm gonna go really in depth into it.
Go ham.
So yes, when I was in my master's program, and not to do the back in my day thing, but back in my day, they had given us an educational discount on Captivate. I think it was like $400 a year for the educational discount, which is, I don't know, it's still a good amount of money, but it's a lot better than where we're at today, which is at best $1,200, at worst like $1,800 for Articulate only. Just that one software that doesn't include any of the other software, especially as a freelancer, like the AI tools that you might use, 11 Labs, and everything has a subscription, and you have the Adobe suite and all those things. So anyway, so $400 back then, that's fine. So we got kind of trained in my program on Adobe Captivate. It was an elective, and it was 2 different courses that you could take to kind of do like Captivate Basics and then Captivate Advanced. Today, they are consistently pushing back the sunsetting of Captivate Classic because people keep demanding it, and they're like, no, we're going to get rid of this. And they're like, no, you can't. And then, so anyway, Adobe kind of has faded a little bit back. I think 10 plus years ago, it was a little bit more equal in terms of market share from Captivate and Storyline. I would say now Articulate Storyline is around 80 to 90%, whereas Captivate is maybe like 5 to 10. And then there's a lot of different new competitors that are coming out. I was lucky enough to be hired again in my first instructional design full-time role, and they gave me Storyline, and one of the very first things was like, okay, Captivate, but we use Storyline here, so you figure it out. And I like basically did an onboarding training and just put in way more bells and whistles than I should have. It was just like, let me test this functionality, and I can use a slider here, and I can do these things. And it was good, it was useful, but I would have designed it differently now than I did back then. But yeah, that was how I learned it. That was back on Storyline 2 when it was a perpetual license and you could buy it once and you didn't have a yearly subscription. They updated to version 3 while I was still there. I still had access to it. I was still kind of up to date on everything. They added the caption editor, which was a big deal at the time. And then they went to the 360 model. We held on to a Storyline 3 for a while because we had, in the college, we were actually training faculty to use Storyline to be able to develop their own, like, it was basically like videos, but like self-running PowerPoints that then they could edit, because especially in like the nursing program, things changed year to year. And if they recorded videos, they would have to re-record the videos every time. So Storyline really was a good use case because then it was like, okay, we can just swap out that one slide and then put it back together and republish it, and everything was fine. So that was before Storyline 360. They have since continuously raised the price almost yearly. And at this point, for a freelancer, it's 1200. I don't know if the new pricing went into effect or not yet, but I think it's going to be 1300 at the basic for like a personal use thing. Education still has some discount, but again, not everybody has access to that. So, yes. So Storyline, the big thing that people have been doing and are still doing is just spamming the free trial. You used to have a 60-day free trial, so you got 2 months to do it, and then you'd have to, like, sign up with another email and then sign in again. It's not ideal, and then especially with the advent of Rise and web-based, e-learning authoring tools, you have to send that to your new account before your old account expires, or you have to pay to get it back, so they're kind of, like, holding your content hostage, which is kind of par for the course at this point. They were kind of the first one to do that, but it's not the ideal use case. So, where are we in 2025? We have lots of new competitors in the space. A lot of them are kind of Rise clones, which are basically nobody needs to develop slide-based learning anymore. We're going full web-based, and it's responsive. It's a little bit more intuitive. It's harder to mess things up with the power of Storyline. You have the responsibility of keeping all your assets organized, keeping your focus order correct, making sure everything has alt text, making sure your timeline lines up correctly, none of your triggers have bugs. It's a lot of things to QC at the end of a project, and especially with complex projects, which is generally where people are going to Storyline, it gets harder and harder to manage that. So where we are today is there are several new competitors in the market, and new, maybe they're 5 years old, 10 years old already, but generally they're slowly getting more and more steam in terms of market adoption and people being open to picking something other than Storyline. I would still admit that 80% of the job posts are going to ask for Storyline. But I do think that the tide is changing a little bit. And I think that if Storyline and Articulate lowered their price to maybe like half of what it is, it would be hands down the market leader for the next, I don't know, 5-10 years probably. But since they have gotten so much more expensive, and there are other options like Parta.io is about $600 a year. It's kind of in between the functionality of Storyline and Rise. So there's definitely some things that you can't do in Parta, but there's a lot more than you can do in Rise and Parta. If you were just looking for a Rise clone, Co-Assemble is like $120 a year, which is like way more expensive. My favorite platform is a Construct 3, which is a game engine. It's definitely a lot higher of a learning curve, but that you're talking about like $120 a year, $130 a year, and it does what Storyline can do times like 10. So there's other options, I guess, is what I'm saying. And my biggest pet peeve right now is, as someone who has recently gone back to iOS and not iOS, but Mac OS. I still have an Android phone, but Mac OS, you got to use Parallels, or they don't have like a native Mac version. Whereas the tendency now with all of the newer tools is to build in the cloud, is to build online, web-based. It works on any platform, works in the browser. For better or worse, it doesn't crash as much as Storyline. Like even now with simple project, I can just lose work because I haven't saved it. That is the number one tip of people that are new to Storyline, is save every 5 minutes or else. I learned that since Captivate. Captivate was even worse, if you can imagine something worse than that.
It sounds like Adobe Premiere a good 5 years ago. So that's pretty much what it was like.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll, we'll get there. So going back to the subreddit for instructional design, my wife was the one who first gave me the link to the post that you made when you first had the idea of starting IDAtlas, because again, I was between jobs, frantically looking anywhere, and then your idea popped up, and it was really something I thought was extremely innovative in that you can crowdsource instructional design through an agency. So tell us how that came to be and then how that's developed so far.
So IDAtlas grew out of me talking to a transitioning teacher that was on the platform that was looking for basically a tutor in instructional design or a coach, an instructional design coach. And talking with her, it was basically that she was like, "I don't wanna sign up for a boot camp because I already know how to do these things. I just can't get in the door. I just can't find someone that will take a risk on me because I don't have a degree in the field and I don't have the experience per se, but I have 20 years of experience as a teacher. And I feel like I can do these things. Like I know how to write curriculum. I know how to make lesson plans and do write objectives and do things like that. And again, that's not all instructional design is, but there is a lot of overlap. And I think that for all of the transitioning teachers, I think there it is a logical jump from I like these things, but I don't like being in the classroom. So it makes sense. They have a bad reputation right now, but I know that there are great instructional designers that were transition teachers. So it's not consistent across the field. Just because you're a transitioning teacher doesn't mean you're not a good instructional designer. But anyway, so that put me on to a lot of the other instructional design boot camps. One of the ones I'm not gonna maybe name drop. I don't know exactly what your audience is like on this, but I won't name drop the specific one I'm thinking of. But one of them was really aggressive in their marketing and was like something like, "Are your pet project instructional design samples good enough, or do they expose you as the fraud you already feel like you are?" And I was like, "Wow!" I was like, "That's not even nice. Like that's rough." And that's one of what, like 10, 15 big ones that are in the market, and they're basically selling this idea that take my boot camp, pay me between $3,000 and $7,000, and don't get a master's degree. Master's degrees won't help you. You don't need any formal education. You just need a good portfolio. And they're kind of preying on these people. And I was like, I don't want to just do another boot camp. So that's where the idea of like, okay, what if I get people to help me with the work that I already have? I can get more work because I have a degree, I have experience, I have clients, I have the network, and we can kind of tag team and work together on some of these things. And it'll be a little bit of mentorship and real world experiences. They can get that experience that they don't have. They can have a little bit of the community in that piece, and they can also have I have a reference in the instructional design world as well. So that's kind of where it started. I think that I created a Discord and I kind of every day regret picking Slack because of the like Google Drive integration and everything else, but I still kind of like Discord for what it is. But yeah, I think the Discord is around maybe like 60, 70-ish people that have been in there. My personal like workflow varies from different times of the year. So like sometimes I'll be more active there. Sometimes we won't have a lot of extra work and things like that. But the community is there, and I do want it to be a place where people can reach out if they have questions or if they want portfolio reviews or they want to just share like I was able to do this thing or any of those kind of things. So where IDAtlas itself is at right now is I have about five-ish consistent subcontractors that I mostly just met on Reddit and through the Discord and have been working with them pretty successfully. I have had a few that have signed up to do stuff and then disappeared on me or were not able to do the work in the way that it needed to be done, but that's part of just kind of taking a risk on people. So I don't know how easy it is to copy my business model, but I do think that it's been worthwhile for me. And I think, again, just being a different model than other just like boot camps where we're just going to try to train you and kick you off, give you a single contract so we can say we placed you in a job and say call it a day. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, I thought it was a great idea. I got to work on a few projects with you, and it was really fun. And you were a really great mentor for helping learn the different programs on there. So if anybody's interested, definitely check out IDAtlas. The other big thing that I wanted to touch on that you have some experience on is gamification. That is my big push here at EWU because I feel it's one of the primary ways that you can really increase engagement when it comes to students, both undergrad and graduate, because a lot of the content that they need to learn has been presented in a way that doesn't give them any context for how it's going to be used in the real world. And my thing is that if you can put them in a scenario where they have to use the content they're learning to solve problems, then you give them the context. They see the value of the content they're learning, and they can see how it leads to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah. No, it's something that I really believe in and part of my own personal learning philosophy. I personally am a big believer in game-based learning and gamification and simulations and things like that. I think though we always need to couch this discussion in it's not for everyone and not everyone likes games. And I think that is maybe less true in the higher ed space, but more so in the corporate space where I have clients that work with large public utilities where the people are like it's more a little bit more blue collar, a little bit more high school educated, not college educated, not big into reading and that kind of stuff. So it is like, well, just tell us what we need to know and let me do my job. And I think that that's a fair perspective on gamification. And I always like to just to say that up front that I don't think gamification is always the answer. What I do believe in really strongly, though, is a piece of what you're talking about, which is narrative based learning, scenario based learning, and then taking that even and putting it into gamification and things like that. So I do think just to kind of define some of those words, like narrative based learning is providing context through a story. So, like you said, I have this concept I want to teach, but then how do I show people when this is useful and why they would care about this? 'Cause with adult learners, you have to think about relevance. You have to think about giving them a use case for these things. Otherwise, it's like, well, why are you telling me this? It's like, I don't care about this thing. So I do think that building in storytelling and narrative into learning is really important. I think that the scenario-based learning can go hand in hand, but is also a little bit different. Scenario-based learning is where you might have some context and then a decision point. So, like a lot of this is like case studies for nursing programs, or I mean, you can use scenarios in any discipline, but I think case studies in the medical field are a really clear and real situation that happens a lot. And the patient comes in with this: do you A or do you B? And then they make the decision. They can see the consequences of their action without killing the patient. Like, you just killed your patient, or you just did this thing. So I think that's important, and in showing them in a low stakes way why you should do this or why you shouldn't do that, which is a little bit more than you should do this. This is the right way to do this. Follow this protocol. I think it's more fun. I think it's more engaging. And I think it actually encourages people to make that mistake and to explore the consequences of those mistakes. And then gamification can take that even a little bit further by implementing game mechanics or building games around those things. So I think all three of those work really well hand in hand. And then again, to kind of go back to where we started with the hotel simulator, the hotel tycoon idea, we kind of were brainstorming and we built this idea of, okay, you play as Ramona and she just inherited a hotel with her brother from their recently deceased uncle. And he was the manager of the hotel. He kind of let it go a little bit. It's a not failing, but it's on its last legs and maybe he's not gonna stick around. Your brother Austin wants to sell it right away, and he's like, no, I'm a real estate agent. I'm gonna sell this thing for like $1 million. You will be free of it. I'll have a quick cash, get my inheritance, and we're moving forward. Whereas Ramona's like, no, we came here when we were kids. We have some nostalgia. We helped out around at the front desk, and it's building a little bit of reasoning and the story behind it. So then basically Austin is like, okay, well, you have 2 years to turn this around into a four-star hotel and pay me off what I would have sold this for. And if you don't, I'm gonna sell it, and you're gonna, like, have all this work for free, and, you're gonna fail at the end of this, and, even if you fix it up, I'll be able to sell it for more, so either way, it's a win-win for me. So, we gave it kind of some real-world, stakes and trying to make it a little bit more realistic. So then basically what happens is you go into the simulator and basically it's almost just a calculator because you're just looking at like, okay, here's how many rooms I have, here are what the rooms have, here are the amenities I have, and here are my monthly report stats. So this is my ADR, these are how many the average daily rate of the rooms, this is the occupancy rate. These are all of the terms that we wanted to define for the students. We now have built them in context in the game, and they have to actually not only understand them, but see how they work together. So like, what's the content? Like if my ADR goes down and my occupancy rate goes up, what does that do? If they're both down, what does that do? If I increase the room rate, how does that affect my occupancy rate? And how does that affect how much I'm actually making per month on these rooms? So it sounds even boring, like even with the gamified version, because it is really just like looking at the report, but then you're able to like upgrade the pool, or you're able to add more rooms, or you're able to upgrade the linens or the entertainment package. And based on what you're doing, you're able to make more money, you're able to charge more for your rooms. You get star level ratings that then allow you to further expand. You have to manage your staff. So you have to either hire more staff or change their salaries. You have to change their training budgets. How much are you giving them in terms of training? Like, because the more training you give, the better the service will be, the better your guest satisfaction will be. And all of those are kind of calculated and play a role into that final, like, cash income number that comes in plus your expenses. So you're kind of really like managing the hotel. It's once a month, so there's like 24 events, and like between months there'll be a football game and you'll get more traffic, or you'll have a leaky pipe and now your expense budget goes up and you have to pay for these things. So like random events are also happening to the learner as they go through the game. And at the end, then they see if they have enough cash to pay off the brother, then they win. Or if they don't, then the brother's like, well, looks like you didn't have enough money. And you actually get to lose. And you get one of the kind of fun things for me was putting in the ghost of Uncle Eric and having him actually do kind of the direct instruction at the beginning. So he has a diary where you get to actually like read, and he talks to you about like, oh, see this is the ADR, and this is what you're going to do here, and this is the budget sheet, and you got to watch this. You can upgrade your rooms and you can upgrade your amenities, and this is going to affect your guest satisfaction. So like we had him be the instructor for all intents and purposes. But then at the end, he's like, it's all right. It's all right. This isn't the end. It's just the end of this chapter if you lose. Or he's like, well, you did better than me. So it was fun. It was definitely a larger lift in terms of development. And I'm definitely shout out to Texas State for taking the chance and being open to kind of doing something really innovative and interesting and putting up the extra like effort into that. But I think it turned out really, really nicely. I don't know if you have show notes, but I can send you a link to the game. You can see it on the IDAtlas website. You can actually play it on the website.
Oh yeah, I'll throw it in there for sure. Yeah. So do you have like a graphic user interface, or is it just the spreadsheets, or is it like one of your things where you have slides and then they go through and they watch the videos of the ghost of the uncle giving this instructions?
Yeah, so this was built in Construct, and back to our articulate storyline question. I started in Construct, and then I was like, well, I kind of just need slides and tabs, and this would be easier to do in Storyline. So then I went back to Storyline, and then as soon as I got to like the math and the equations and all the like the variables in there, I was like, no, I'm not doing this in Storyline. So I went back to Construct. So Construct is still a no code editor, but you can put JavaScript code in there, and it's block coding like Scratch, but in I would say a more refined version of that and a more powerful version of that. So it looks like something that you might build in Storyline in terms of like the layout. There's a graphic interface. I used Midjourney to create all of the characters, and a lot of the scenes in the backgrounds, or I think it was also Midjourney. I'm pretty sure it was Midjourney. For like, I don't know, if something happened like on Valentine's Day, then there was like a table with a romantic dinner set, or there was a leaky pipe. I had a lot of AI generated stuff, and then used 11 Labs for the voices. So that's fully voiced as well. So there was quite a lot of AI involved in that, but a lot of the actual development was done in Construct.
Yeah, well, for creating images or video, and you don't have stock content, it is pretty much necessary to use AI at this point. It's just it makes my job so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that we've come a long way. The one AI thing that I'm still not really sold on is the AI avatar videos. So, like, people that are thinking about developing, like, lectures with AI, I think it's just rough. It's hard for me to watch it after, like, a minute or 2. I get the use case, and I get the goal and the intention behind it, and I think it's a noble goal of, like, "Oh, well, we can just make people do whatever they want." But I always feel like the argument of like, "Oh, it adds connection to like, people wanna see humans," and I'm like, "I don't think they do." I think that it's more distracting to have an uncanny human-like figure that's not a subject matter expert, that has nothing to do with me, it's just a random person, like a random image of a person even, not even a real person. I don't know. I see the benefit for, again, like, scenario-based learning and narrative and all that stuff. I just feel like the technology isn't sophisticated enough today. I'll put what are July 2025. I don't we're not quite there yet. Maybe in a couple months we'll be there, but I would say for now it's still really rough to watch more than like 2 minutes of anything that's AI avatar video. It's tough.
Well, in addition to that, I would also say lecture in a traditional sense is I had to record 5 years worth of lecture of just talking heads of instructors at my previous job, and it's pointless. Like, it could have been a podcast or it could have been text. It's not interesting, it's not engaging.
I think that if I knew the person, like if Jim Ryan was going to give me a lecture on a topic where he was the expert and he was passionate about it and he cared about it and that came through in the presentation, that's valuable. I think that that's worth something. I agree that augmenting that with like text on the screen or images or video and things like that, I think that there is some value in that. But like when it's just a random person that's just supposed to like be a stand-in human, then I don't know. Again, I'm personally not sold on AI avatars, but the audio generation of like 11 Labs, Well Said Labs is amazing, especially for like my work doing voiceovers and things like that. It's amazing to not have to go back to the subject matter expert after like 2 months and redo this one word that they pronounced wrong or that with that like, oh, actually, now we need to update this date because it's the wrong date. And they're like, okay, well, like, how can I find that person again? Even professional voice actors, and I am a fan, and I would always advocate for like, if you have the budget and you can hire a professional voice actor, you should, because again, I think that it's another level of value to a point. To a point. I think like if you want to max out your quality, I think you have to go human. But I think AI goes a long way, not so much in the generation, but in the editing and in the after it's built. That's where you kind of save time and money.
Yeah, and that especially comes into play with storytelling. Like, and I would highly encourage anybody to just go and listen to an audiobook, for example, to see the difference between what an AI can do and what an actual human can do with emotive and accents. I'm right in the middle of this series Dungeon Crawler Carl. I don't know if you've heard about that one before, but it is absolutely addictive and amazing, and you can absolutely tell how much effort has been put into the voice acting and the audio mixing and whatnot. It's just incredible. So they're not comparable, but AI is extremely useful for what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, and I think 11 Labs recently added some more controls to, like, the speed and the tone and things like that. I don't think we're quite there to, like, full emotions, and it's a lot of training data to mimic a human, so that's where you're like, "Okay, this is faster. This isn't saving me time if I have to, like, keep redoing the same, line over and over and over again, whereas I could just pay someone to do it right once, or I could do it myself right once." But I think there is still some interesting use cases, like you said, that there's definitely value in relaying information through audio where either it's not feasible for because of the budget or because you need something that you can go back and edit easily. I will say, plug for 11 Labs voice cloning. That thing is amazing. If you give it enough training data, that thing will mimic you like perfectly. Like I have it with one of my clients. We had an in-house person that did voiceover and she was amazing, but like she's also the project manager. Like I don't think that she minded so much, like just taking the afternoon off and just like recording everything. But like oh, this thing was pronounced wrong, or oh, this changed, and now like, you got to work within her schedule and things like that. We were able to clone her voice, and you literally can't tell. Actually, we did a test with a client where it was one of her human and one with the AI, and they thought the human one was the AI, and I was like, okay, that's crazy. So we can't tell. But yeah, 11 Labs is definitely one of my favorite tools that I still pay for that subscription because it has proven very valuable.
Yeah, it is definitely very cool. So you're here at this point. We have your past. What do you see coming up in the future for yourself and IDAtlas?
Yeah. So I have, I think before we started recording, I was telling you about my adventures on LinkedIn. I've definitely picked up a little bit more posting on LinkedIn and sharing things on LinkedIn. One of my posts that got a lot of traction was a comparison that I did between the Articulate Suite and then Parta, which is the authoring tool that I'm currently using, which is again a little bit of in between Storyline and Rise. So it's web-based like Rise, but you can actually edit the blocks, and you have some powerful like website editing capabilities. Whereas in Rise, you're just like, I want a video and I want an audio now and I want this. And it's like full length blocks and stuff. So in Parta, you can kind of edit that. So anyway, that got a lot of attention because I think, like you said, people are really interested in getting out of Articulate. And I think that it is kind of cost prohibitive for a lot of people. And because of that, I've kind of gotten into evaluating a lot of different e-learning authoring tools. And I can't share everything that I am aware of right now, but I will say that there are a lot of really, really interesting tools that are out now and coming out in the next year or so. And that kind of blow Storyline out of the water in different ways. I think Storyline is still going to have its hooks in the industry for a little while, but I do think that that dominance will be consistently coming down. And I hope that I will continue to be a part of that process of unhooking them a little bit from this industry, because I do think that this tendency for slide-based learning that came from PowerPoint and is now being put online in a day and age where we need to think mobile first and responsive and fluid design, I think that creates bad habits for instruction. For me, even like when I go into Storyline, I have an idea of like, okay, I'm going to create this type of training, and I know you can change like custom slide sizes, and I have done like a vertical Storyline projects that are a little bit more mobile compatible. But again, I think we're pushing a tool in a way that they want us to push it, and they want to go, but they don't want to like facilitate it all the way. So it is an interesting process. Yeah, just to reiterate there. I see a lot of new competitors in the e-learning development space, which I think is healthy and good. And if Articulate decided that they wanted to actually compete and stop being a monopoly, I would also gladly have them change their pricing models and support freelancers a little bit more. So that's kind of a side mission of the business. I am constantly looking for more work to support, again, generally small businesses, nonprofits, and in higher ed institutions with instructional design kind of all forms, and kind of growing to expand and keep helping people get into the field as they need to and keep growing there. I've actually last month went to an expo down here in Brazil in São Paulo that got me a little taste of the industry down here, and that was also kind of interesting to see how training and development is done in Brazil and in South America in general. But that was interesting. One of the things that I am very interested in for the near term future is the idea of mobile learning, micro learning, and chat-based learning. So all three of those together, working on some projects for developing that into a kind of platform to be able to help instructional designers develop training that can meet learners where they are. So instead of bringing them into an LMS, or you have to go to this site, log in, and here's your password. Oh, you forgot your password. Now go back to your password. What if we could just train them by sending them a text message? Or if we could send them on Microsoft Teams or on Zoom or on Google Chat or something like that. So I'm exploring that a little bit, and hope to have more of that in the future, and exploring non-traditional methods of training, and mostly not even non-traditional, just not slide-based type training. So, yeah.
We're done with that. We're good. We've moved forward since then. It's 2025.
Time, yes. This time, I would agree with that.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for everything. It's always been a blast getting a chance to talk with you and work with you, and we'll have to talk some more in the future for sure.
For sure, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share more about some of the upcoming projects and things that I'm looking at.
Well, then we'll have to circle back then. All right. Thanks a lot.